All right, so welcome everyone to our 2025 Nonprofit Trends presentation. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Ken Cerini. I'm the managing partner of Cerini Associates. We're a full-service accounting firm. We work with pretty much every industry out there, but our biggest industry and the industry that we dedicate the most time, energy, and resources to is the nonprofit sector. So that's kind of what we're going to be talking about today. But before we get started, let me go over a couple of the administrative ground rules. So we've placed the presentation in the chat. If Christine, if you can place it in again, this way people can get a copy of that presentation, that would be great. I'm going to try to hopefully get people to talk it up a little bit more in the chat. So I'm so used to doing things in person, and I kind of miss that whole in-person aspect of things. So I'm one of those people who feed off the crowd. So if I say something funny, which I know is probably not going to happen because I'm an accountant, can you please laugh in the chat so I know that you actually thought it was funny so I can throw in more jokes. If you don't like the jokes, then don't laugh and I'll just stop telling them. My daughter does that all the time to me. So please feel free to use the chat. Let's communicate. If you feel strongly about something I say, or if you have some insight into something, just kind of share with each other. What we're going to do is we're going to take the chat, clean it up, and pass that around when we send out the recording. So this way you're in a situation where, you know, some of the information that's in the chat could be useful for everyone also. So let's try to make this interactive. Let's kind of use shared ideas and everything else. So that would be awesome. If you do have questions, please throw the questions in the chat. I will not be monitoring the Q&A. I know a lot of people, you know, think throw the questions in the Q&A. It's hard for me to, I can't chew gum and walk at the same time. So it's hard for me to actually monitor the Q&A and also monitor the chat and everything else. So please just, again, throw things into the chat, please. That would be awesome. We're recording today's session, so a copy of this will be sent out to everybody at the end of the week. So again, please, you know, that is going to happen. So, you know, feel free to share the recording with anybody who you want to share it with. We encourage, you know, the more the merrier. This is done to kind of share information. Please also understand that we do not have a crystal ball, that a lot of the trends that we put in here are where we saw the industry moving coming out of 2024 and moving into 2025. So some of the information in here is going to be a little different from what actually happens. If we could actually figure this out, we'd be a lot better off than we are now. Also, please understand that you know, the views that are in here are my views, and just take it from that perspective. We're not taking any political stances here. We're just trying to report the information the way it is. And the reason I say that is we knew coming into this year and knew coming into the you know, the 2025 Trends Report that the election, whichever way it went, was going to have a significant impact on the nonprofit sector. And you know, the fact that Trump was in office in the past and some of the policies he tried to get passed back then gave us some real insight into the direction that this administration would take. I don't know that anybody thought that the impact would happen on day one, and I don't know anybody expected yesterday to be the day that it was. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in a couple seconds. But you know, we had the presentation done, and then we had to do some last minute adjustments and stuff. So let's see where everything pans out. So let's get started. Oops. So I think everybody knows that on day one of President Trump's administration, he issued 7 executive orders. There's only 6 here because, unfortunately, I combined Unleashing American Energy with Putting America First in International Environmental Agreements, but they are 2 separate executive orders. So kind of walking through these pretty quickly, the American people against invasion. Trump took a fairly liberal approach to the term invasion, and he's looking at the the border crossing on the southern border of the United States as kind of an invasion, with a lot of the illegal immigrants coming into the United States. So he's invoked some provisions that allow him to have certain departments of the Homeland Security, Department of Justice, Department of State, to kind of round up some of the illegal immigrants and ship them back, and to really close down the borders and clamp down the borders. That's already having an impact. We're hearing from some of our nonprofit clients that there have been, raids of some of their organizations and shelters and stuff, looking for individuals who are not supposed to be here. So that's been a big issue already. Reevaluating and realigning the United States foreign aid. The NGOs, non-governmental organizations, foreign organizations, have historically received a lot of funding from the United States. It's about $20 billion a year. And the Trump administration is trying to clamp down on some of that foreign aid. And while you understand that Trump is looking to kind of focus more of those dollars and more of that energy back here in the United States, some of the impact that's going to have is on some of the foreign organizations and foreign partnerships that have been created, and things like climate, world health, those types of issues are going to run into some decrease in funding. Again, putting America first in international and environmental agreements, and unleashing American energy. Both of those have to do with environmental considerations, where Trump is looking to reduce participation in some of the global initiatives that are out there, and looking to utilize more of the resources that are here in the U.S. He's, as part of this, eliminated some of the requirements for the use of electric vehicles. So you're in a situation where there's a lot of change happening there too. Ending illegal discrimination and restoring merit-based opportunity. I'll talk about that more a little bit later, but that's really dealing with a whole change in how DEIA is looked at here in the country. So we'll look at that a little bit more in a few minutes. Defending women from gender ideology extremism and restoring biological truth to the federal government. That's kind of looking at the aspect of the fact that there are, in the executive order, looks at kind of two distinct sexes, male and female, and kind of eliminate some of the blurring that existed in the past administration, some of the appropriate allowing of people to be themselves, and this kind of maybe rolls things back a little bit from there. So again, all of these are going to have impacts on the nonprofit sector. And then finally, enforcing the Hyde Amendment, which basically prohibits the use of Medicaid to pay for abortions. So again, you look at some of these executive orders, or pretty much every single one of the executive orders, and they're going to have some level of impact on the nonprofit sector, and they're already having some level of impact on the nonprofit sector. Anybody who was kind of following anything that happened yesterday, the federal government released or put a pause on federal agencies, federal funding to the nonprofit sector, to give federal agencies the ability to go through all of the contracts and agreements and everything to ensure that all the contracts and agreements were aligned with the executive orders that Trump had signed in play. The pause was supposed to go until February 10th, which was the time frame that the different agencies had to review the various agreements and contracts and projects and activities. And then they were supposed to then decide where to go from there. There was a temporary restraining order filed by Democracy Forward and other agencies. And as of last night, a judge issued a I guess a release where the funds are now being released. So there's a 30-day stay on the freeze on funds, or the pause on funds. So who knows where that's going to go? I can tell you that things are going to have trickle-down impacts. Everybody's concerned. Everybody's worried. If federal funds aren't flowing smoothly, state funds and city funds and local funds, may not flow smoothly either. So these are going to be some difficult times over the next 30 days and beyond as all of this gets sorted out. And I think it's going to behoove the nonprofit sector to start looking at what other resources are available. How can they diversify some of their revenue streams? Some of the funding that they've gotten from the federal government in the past may not be there going forward. There is going to be a cutback in federal funding. So sorry to kind of start off the presentation and start off the morning with this type of news, but unfortunately that's where we are. In terms of the ending illegal discrimination, I said I would get a little bit more into that. So what it does is it alters the federal government's approach to DEIA activities and initiatives. DEIA references are going to be removed from all contracts. So federal contracts will no longer require minority and women involvement in contracting. Right now, there's preferential treatment for minority and women-owned businesses. That's kind of going away. And basically, the thought process here under the executive order is that while you can kind of broaden the pool and look at all resources that are out there, you actually have to make decisions based upon merit. So it's going to be more of a merit-based decision process. So it's going to require increased documentation and increased kind of thought process on the part of nonprofit organizations in terms of kind of making decisions with respect to hiring practices and possibly even the way the EO is drafted. It's drafted pretty broadly. It could also impact things like your programming and how you're programming and how DEIA is kind of viewed within the organization's programming activities. It also puts restriction on race-conscious admission practices in education. I know that there's been equal opportunity practices within higher education, and a lot of that is being removed through this executive order too. This executive order kind of eliminates 4 or 5 other executive orders that existed, including some that go back to the 1960s. So this is having a kind of a big impact overall. Again, hiring decisions must be based on qualifications alone and cannot involve preferences. You can recruit across broader spectrums and stuff like that to make sure that everybody is represented in the decision-making process, but you can't just pick someone because of their race or their sex or anything else. And then it also eliminates requirements that government contractors develop and certify annually that they have affirmative action plans in place. So again, this is setting DEIA back a bunch. Couple things in terms of the political landscape, and as I said, during Trump's first administration, he gave some real insight into the direction that he was moving in by some of the proposals he made. Some of them passed, some of them didn't. But I think it gives us a good understanding of where he may be going with all of this. And I think some of the policies that he's been talking about through his election and some of the policies he tried to implement back in his first administration, some of them have already come to fruition through the executive orders that he's put in place. So this was actually my first slide originally before yesterday hit. So during Trump's first administration, he proposed eliminating the National Endowment for the Arts. He did not get the votes for that in order to do it. Remember, though, now that the Congress is a Republican Congress, so that could potentially happen. So again, something to kind of keep an eye on that. And not that the National Endowment for the Arts does provide a whole lot of funding for the arts, but it does provide some, and it's important funding. The administration's America First focus could reduce grants and contracts for international development projects. We're seeing that as part of the executive orders. One of the things that we were afraid of was withdrawal from international agreements and reduced participation in global initiatives, and it looks like that's going to happen. So again, organizations that are working in climate change, human rights, which is spelt wrong there, sorry, and world health, you could see some decreases in funding. And as I said before, NGOs rely on federal funding of about $20 billion a year, and we're expecting that funding going to foreign organizations and foreign initiatives is going to shrink. In his first administration, President Trump tried to repeal the Affordable Care Act and implement significant changes in healthcare funding. We expect that there'll be some changes happening on the healthcare front. Not sure what that's going to be at this point. Kelly just put some additional information into the chat on the pause on the freeze. Trump's 2021 budget, in his 21-20 budget, President Trump proposed cutting $1.6 trillion over 10 years from programs that help people with lower modest incomes meet basic needs. That, again, didn't go through, but again, it gives you an insight into where the mindset is and what we may see during this administration. So again, things like food and housing and shelter, all that's going to do is going to put a greater demand on nonprofit organizations that are human services type organizations, because there's going to be potentially less resources coming in to help. Something that's a little different, the gift and estate tax threshold. We've been talking, and we'll talk a little bit more today about the fact that we're going to see the largest level of wealth transference that's ever happened in this country. And the expectation is somewhere between 11 and $12 trillion will pass on to the nonprofit sector over the next 25 years. So one of the things that is out there is you have what do you call it, a estate and gift tax. And the estate and gift tax is the amount that individuals can shelter before any amounts are subject to taxation. The taxation is pretty steep. When you transfer amounts above that threshold, the tax could be in the 50% range. So if I give to charity, it's only costing 50 cents on a dollar because the tax is a 50% tax. That threshold right now is $14 million per person. That $14 million was supposed to drop down or is scheduled to drop down to $7 million. I think it's sometime in August. So if you shelter or plan or die before that drop, you can shelter 14 million per person. If you plan or die after that, it's only 7. That 14 million threshold came under the Trump administration. So it is possible that he may extend that 14 million threshold so that it does not sunset. And that could have an impact on how much estate and trust money goes to nonprofit organizations. Immigration issues, as we talked about on the executive orders, they continue to be an issue. And as I said before, there have been certain rates of shelters and everything. We're hearing a lot from our clients that, and clients are grappling with what do they do. I don't know what have you guys experienced any governmental agencies coming into your sites and looking around or trying to take people? I don't know if you've experienced any of that. If you have, if you want to add into the chat, maybe some of the things that you guys are doing. What are you doing in terms of, are you letting them in? Are you not letting them in? Are you forcing them to have warrants? So if anybody wants to share in the chat what they're doing, what their experiences have been, I think that could be helpful for everyone. I'm going to switch gears a little, maybe talk a little bit about the economy. Hopefully this will be slightly better news. So inflation rates are expected to stabilize in 2025 at around 2.2%, which is so much better than what it was, the last few years. 2024 was 2.5%, but over the last 4 years, we've experienced a combined 24-25% inflation. So, the fact that we're actually stabilizing now at somewhere around low twos is really, really good. From a U.S. economic growth, the U.S. economy is anticipated to grow at a rate of approximately 2.5% in 2025. Again, a plus there. Unemployment rates, the unemployment rate in the United States in 2025 is expected to be approximately 3.9% at the end of 2025. That's versus 4.2% at the end of 2024. So again, unemployment is going to be in a better place. This is overall unemployment. Unemployment for minorities is still higher. The unemployment rate for minorities is up over 6%. So again, that is something that still is troublesome. Interest rates, the Federal Reserve is expected to reduce interest rates, but not as quickly as we anticipated. We're expecting at the end of the year, the interest rates will drop down to about 4%, which is only about 0.25% decline for the year. But again, we're still seeing it move in the right direction. What that means is that your borrowing rate is going to stay up a little bit higher than we were hoping, which hurts because, again, with some of these slowdowns and shutdowns, you might have to be tapping into your lines of credit a little bit longer in 2025. Charitable contributions are expected to exceed the 2024 levels by about 3.9%. Again, another positive there. So that's a good thing. Demand for services. Again, we're expecting the demand for services to be higher than in the past, especially with respect to when you start looking at some of the executive orders that President Trump signed. We do expect there to be an uptick in the level of services that are going to be required to be provided by the nonprofit sector. We are expecting government funding to drop. I mean, the Trump administration has made it pretty clear that they're looking to spend less money in some of these areas. So we do expect funding to drop at the federal level, and that's expected to trickle down. New York State is expected to have a shortfall over the next 3 years. The budget shortfall that we've heard for the 25-26 year is about $1 billion, and then that's supposed to be increased to $6.2 billion over the 26-27 year and 7.1 for the 27-28 year. So there is going to be some gaps, and we do expect government funding to drop. So that's going to make it more imperative for organizations to look for other sources of funding and look at other discretionary funding. In terms of where the nonprofit sector is overall, there are about 1.8 million nonprofit organizations in the United States. That's up about 1.4% annually over the past 20 years. More than 10% of companies in the U.S. are nonprofit organizations, which represent about 6% of the U.S. economy. You can see that the nonprofit community employs 12.8 million people, 64 million board members. They work with 75.7 million volunteers, and they have 34+ million donors. So it is a big, big, big business, which makes it even more, I guess, disturbing that when you look at, and it's not just the Trump administration, but it's been every administration, there is no member of the cabinet that focuses on nonprofit alone. We should have a nonprofit member of the cabinet, but unfortunately, that is not the case. But it is a significant part of the overall business. 97% of nonprofits have budgets of less than $5 million annually. 92% have less than $1 million, and 88% have less than $500,000. So you can see that a lot of nonprofit organizations across the nation are relatively small. Here in the United States, here in New York, those percentages are not as big. We have more larger nonprofit organizations here in New York. So these percentages that are listed here are all national. And about last stat here on the bottom, 71% of nonprofits have seen an increase in demand for their programs and services in the last year, and we're expecting that to go up again. Here in New York, things are a little bit different from what we're seeing on the national level. Employee contributions. So in 2022, nonprofit organizations provided 1.3 million jobs to New Yorkers, accounting for just over 1 in 6 private sector jobs in the state. So the New York nonprofit scene employs more individuals than we see at the national level. There's been a decline in nonprofit organizations here in New York. As I said, at the national level, we're up about 1.4%, but here between 2017 and 2022, the number of nonprofits in New York fell by about 4.1%. So we're seeing a decline in nonprofits while the rest of the nation is seeing an increase in nonprofits. Nonprofits do play a crucial role in the state and local economies. They're an essential part of the community fabric. We all know that. Many nonprofits rely on government funding. That I would say probably about 60% of all nonprofits rely on some level of government funding to support their services. We have seen here in New York, and especially in New York City, contract delays, slowdown in payments. We have some clients that are still waiting for 2022 budget modifications. It's taking longer to collect money, so that's definitely been an issue. In 2024, there were 344,000 nonprofit organizations in the United States, with 33,536 of them located in New York. So we do account for a large percentage of the national organizations. So the healthcare and social assistance sector had the largest share of nonprofits, about 41.3%, and they account for 61.4% of the nonprofit jobs in New York State. Other significant sectors, obviously, are education, other services, professional and business services, leisure, hospitality, those types of things. From a regional impact, nonprofits support more than 1 in 5, jobs in the private sector. So nationally, they're 1 in 6. Here it's 1 in 5. Wage comparison, average annual wages paid by nonprofits in New York were lower than wages paid by other businesses. Again, still an issue. It's hard to compete with businesses if we're not paying the same level of wages. And again, with the government funding tightening, it's going to be harder and harder to continue to compete at that level. Again, we are, and I'm going to say it over and over again, we need to find ways to bring on more discretionary funds. And then a couple other stats here in terms of employment trends. Prior to 2020, employment nonprofits were growing in nearly every state, with New York having the 4th highest increase. However, again, during the pandemic, we saw a lot of people leave New York, and we've seen a decline in the number of nonprofit jobs. And then by 2022, employment at other private sector establishments had fully recovered, but nonprofits are still struggling to regain the employment levels they had pre-pandemic. Some additional information, Giving Tuesday. Giving Tuesday is the largest giving day of the year. Total dollars donated in the US were about $3.6 billion, which is kind of an increase of 16% compared to Giving Tuesday of 2023. So that's a major plus. Total participants in the US were 36.1 million people gave on Giving Tuesday, which is an increase of 7%. Participants who made financial contributions, 18.5 million people gave. That's an increase of about 4%. Participants who gave goods was about 12.9 million, an increase of 32%. So we're seeing an uptick in the amount of goods that were given. Increase of volunteerism. Volunteerism was up about 4%. And then individuals who spoke out about causes was up about 17%. So this was a kind of overall a good Giving Tuesday this year. We had an increase in funding, increase in kind contributions, an increase in advocacy. So a lot of positives coming out of this year's Giving Tuesday. All right, let's talk a little bit about fundraising. We've been talking about, the fact that we need to come up with additional discretionary funds. And for most nonprofit organizations, the best way to do that is through fundraising activities. So some fundraising challenges that we're seeing out there. So donor fatigue, 87% of organizations are saying that they're running into challenges because donors are just, tired of giving to organizations. Donors just aren't engaged, 85%. Recurring giving, 83%, year-over-year fundraising growth. So, I mean, you can kind of go down and you can see all the percentages here. I think the key things that I kind of want to throw out and kind of ask are, and feel free if you want to kind of so Kelly just asked the question, what fundraising challenges are you all experiencing? And I'm going to throw out some other questions if people don't mind just throwing in the chat what they're doing with respect to answers to some of these questions. So I guess my first question is, what is everybody doing to differentiate themselves, right? There's so many nonprofit organizations out there, as we talked about here in the state of New York. What are organizations doing to try to differentiate themselves? What are organizations doing to kind of separate themselves from the rest of the organizations raising funds? So that would be my first question. If anybody wants to kind of throw in some stuff in the chat there. While you guys are thinking through that, I'll throw out another question. How and what are you communicating with your donors? So some people are saying they're doing increased social media, storytelling, direct mail. That's all important. Are people using videos? We're hearing that videos are going to be or continue to be a much bigger tool in fundraising on a go-forward basis. Are you using, how are you making donors feel like they're connected to your organization? That's one of the questions. I mean, donors are giving you money. How are you showing them how you're utilizing their funds? What's the impact that their donation is making overall? These are really, really important questions to be asking yourself. If you're going to be going after donors, part of the problem is, or what we've seen is that the nonprofit sector does not really do a great job of engaging their donors. I'll get a request for a donation, I'll make a donation, and then the next time I hear from the nonprofit organization is when they're asking for another donation. So what are we doing in terms of engaging our donors throughout the course of the year, so the donors really kind of understand what's happening within the organization, so the donors really understand how their money is being used, what the impact is. Those are the types of things that we need to kind of start working on. I think if you're looking to bring on additional discretionary funds, you're going to have to be able to, again, show donors how they're being used. All right, we got some good chats up here. People are talking about some of the stuff that they're doing, redesigning newsletters, talking to donors. Donors appreciate seeing collaboration, so trying to make it clear how their investment has a multiplier effect, which is super important. Anytime you can show leverage, that's going to be super important. So all of these things are good and important. How many of you guys have started to use AI in your fundraising activities, and in what way have you started to use AI in your fundraising activities? I think one of the things that AI has proven to be super useful for us, it's really good in communication. Things like ChatGPT and other AI is really good at helping to develop information, helping to really target communication. And anytime you can target communication to your donors, the better off you're going to be. So from a why AI matters perspective, I think it helps to increase efficiency. Statistics have shown that, again, the more targeted a campaign is to donors, the greater the likelihood and the greater the amount that donors are going to give to your organization. So anytime you can kind of enhance your personalization, anytime you can kind of make the donor feel like that the communication is targeted directly to them, I think that's a positive. Someone's put in the chat they need to understand ethical and environmental issues related to AI. I do believe that everybody should be looking at developing an AI policy, which kind of looks at how you utilize AI within the organization. Also, to help ensure that anytime you are putting information into your AI, that you understand how that information is being used, whether or not that information is being shared. So you have to be really, really careful about the confidentiality of the information that's within AI. So that's super important. But again, I think AI is proven to be a very, very useful tool. And I think organizations kind of need to start thinking about using AI to, again, make their asks more personalized. Kelly just put in the chat a sample AI policy. We've actually also seen some organizations use AI to do a first run of a grant application. Please understand that anytime that you are utilizing AI, you can't just take what comes out of AI as gospel. You still have to go through it. You have to check it. You still want to add your voice to it and everything else. So AI is just part of the process. It's the starting part of the process to kind of get your thoughts a little more organized, to go through a lot of data. So if you have a good CRM system and you have a lot of information with you in your CRM system, you can utilize AI to go through the CRM system and really gain a deeper understanding of your donors. So you can kind of get a better understanding of why your donors gave, when they gave, what campaigns did they give to, so that you have a better understanding of what it is the donors are looking for, so that when you do engage with your donors, you can engage with your donors appropriately, engaging with them surrounding things that are important to them. So some of the places where we're seeing AI used in nonprofit fundraising, excuse me. Personalized marketing, as I talked about, how do you can use AI to tailor donor messages based on behavior. So if donors are giving to one of your programs, every time you talk about one program, the donors are giving contributions, you can kind of use AI to pull that information, understand that information, and then create personalized marketing plans for those donors so that you're really focusing on what those donors are interested in. You can use AI to craft email sequences that drive donations. You can use it for social media. Somebody had mentioned social media. You can use AI to plan out social media so that you actually have a thought out campaign in terms of how you're going to approach things. You can use social media to streamline event planning. You can use it for brainstorming and budgeting and feedback analysis and all that other stuff. It's really, really cool in terms of some of that stuff. Somebody had asked a question, which CRM systems are most effective? So if anybody are using CRM systems that they really, really like and they feel are super effective, if you can please post in the chat what CRM system you're using and what about it that you feel is strong. So that would be helpful for people who are looking at CRM systems. As I said before, you can use AI to help with like an initial draft of a grant. It kind of makes it faster. You can get out more grant proposals using AI. Data-driven insights. You can analyze trends to improve fundraising strategies. So what are some of the trends you're seeing out there in terms of your donor base? And then AI chatbots allow you to really engage with your donors. So as donors are making donations, you can respond. You can set up regular communication with your donors so that the donors are getting regular communication from you and have responses through the AI chatbots. So there's a lot of places where you can kind of use AI in the fundraising activities of the organization. some of the giving stats out there. So one of the things that we definitely like to stress is recurring giving. You want to be in a situation where think of recurring giving as almost like that gym membership, right? Where you join a gym, and when you join the gym, you put it on your credit card and say, all right, I'm going to put my monthly gym membership on the credit card and I'll go every month and everything else. And then you forget about it. You forget it's there. That's kind of where you want to try to get people in terms of giving. You'd like to get them to be doing monthly or recurring gifts to the organization, because if they're doing recurring gifts, then you have a steady flow of money coming into the organization. So that's something that we definitely try to strive for. I guess I have some questions here too. What strategies are you guys using in terms of trying to promote or individuals to give recurring gifts to your organization? And are you guys doing anything in terms of trying to upsell? So when someone makes a gift to your organization, before they kind of hit that checkout and say, make the donation, do you kind of pop a screen in there that says, oh, we see you're interested in our organization. Would you consider a monthly gift or something like that? And consider trying to upsell to your donors. From a grants and impact reporting perspective, we're seeing some challenges there. We're seeing increased scrutiny from funders and government bodies. It's been, I think, a bit of a challenge in terms of grants these days. Funders are, I typically find that when you're dealing with private foundations, they don't want to fund you forever. There's usually limitations on how many years a private foundation will fund you for. They typically want to know that if they are going to fund you, that you have a plan in place to replace the funds that are coming in, so that you're going to be self-sustainable beyond their dollars. So it puts a lot more challenges on nonprofit organizations to kind of think through these things in terms of trying to understand, what your plan is in terms of once the foundation dollars go away. The other thing we're seeing in terms of scrutiny is we're seeing on the government side, we're seeing an increased level of audits that are taking place. So that's something that we're seeing on the rise. And we're also seeing an increased level of administration that's being pushed down to the nonprofit sector. There is the New York City Mayor's Office, MOX, is actually looking at creating almost like a single audit, similar to what the federal government has in place. There are so many agencies of New York City, and all of them are undergoing the need to review and audit nonprofit organizations that are receiving funding from them. So rather than having to go through 6, 7 audits, if you get 6 or 7 different funding streams from New York City, they're trying to put that back on the nonprofit sector and have nonprofit organizations undergo a more comprehensive audit with their external auditors. So that's something that is in the works right now at the New York City level. It's something that a lot of the audit firms are working together to review and try to streamline that process, but understand that we're seeing a lot more of that happening, where government is trying to push a little bit more of that back onto the sector. There's a greater demand for detailed, quantifiable impact reports. Everybody wants to know what organizations are doing and how their dollars are going to be used to create impact, and they're going to want to see more linkage between the dollars that they're providing to your organization and the overall impact that's taking place. So that's something that's important. You're seeing greater complexity in federal grant policies and shifting priorities. And again, with a lot of the executive orders, I think you're going to see a curtailment of some of that federal funding that's coming into play. There are new rules, since we are an accounting firm, I might as well bring this up. There are new rules that are coming into effect that are going to be going into effect October of this year with respect to government funds and the audit requirements surrounding those. It's called uniform guidance, which is already in place, but they're going to be raising the threshold, the current threshold for a uniform guidance audit. If you receive federal funds of over 750 or more right now, you have to go through a uniform guidance audit. That threshold is going to be increasing to $1 million. So that hopefully will, for some of you, remove the need for a uniform guidance audit. So what nonprofits are facing is stricter criteria and rigorous documentation. Again, as I said before, greater demand for impact analysis. They want to know how their funds that they're giving are having an impact overall within the organization. I think you have some level of misalignment between funder expectations and nonprofit realities. I think funders expect organizations to, or they want the money to go for programmatic activities. Nobody really wants to fund administration anymore. We're seeing much more targeted dollars going to nonprofit organizations. And unfortunately, nonprofit organizations need much more by way of discretionary funds. So that's important. Yeah, I see a little message here in the chat that government funders are moving from cost-based to performance-based or rate-based contracts. I agree with that. We're seeing a bigger uptick in performance-based contracts happening out there, and that's an important thing to kind of consider. Some of the challenges or strategies, I'm sorry, for success. I think it's important to maybe just simplify and sharpen the impact communication, right? I mean, you want to basically get the impact across in terms of what's the impact that you're having from an organizational perspective. Make the information quick and easy to understand. Make the communication, I think, more tangible and relatable for organizations. You can use visual charts and infographics and things like that, I think, are important. What are the key metrics that funders care about, and make sure you're harping on those or talking a lot about those key metrics. Take the time to understand what's important to the funders. And then obviously the human stories are super important, right? You want to pair data with the human stories for a deeper impact. I mean, if you watch any of the reality TV shows that are out there, and anybody who's heard me speak have heard me say this before, if you watch any of the reality TV shows out there, they give you backstories of the individuals who are competing on the reality TV shows. And they do it because they want you to be engaged. They want you to feel for the individuals. They want you to get behind them and support them. We need to do that more with respect to the organizations that we work with. We need to kind of get our donors and our funders more engaged with the what we're doing, and some of that comes with that the backstories, and those backstories are super important, and we need to make sure we're including some of that stuff in everything we do. Andrea posted, donors are and funders are more interested in measurable impact versus intention. So yeah, I mean, the more we can kind of talk about the real measurable impact, the better off we're going to be. We've talked about this already, and it's even more important now with some of the executive orders and the shrinking of government funding. We need to diversify our funding streams. I was talking to an organization the other day, and they asked me, is it important to diversify revenue streams? I'm like, yes, it's definitely important these days. We need to find ways that we can build recurring donor programs. That's what we were talking about before. How do we get donors to give over and over again so that we have those recurring dollars coming into the organization that we can kind of rely on? We need to host events and crowdfunding campaigns and different things that we can do to ensure that there are other dollars coming into the organization. We need to figure out how we can be better partners and partner more effectively with businesses, right? I think a lot of times, we approach businesses with one solution or one idea. Hey, we're doing a golf outing and we need you to sponsor our golf outing. I think what we need to do is we need to really sit down with our corporate partners and find out how we can be better partners with our corporate sponsors and stuff. And some of that really is, again, it's getting that communication open. It's developing ways that it becomes a two-way street where both sides benefit from the relationship. Again, we want to turn our donors into partners. But one of the things, and again, a lot of you have heard me say this already, but we have Cerini Associates, our accounting firm, we have a partnership with Book Fairies. And we set up the partnership because, we wanted to have a deeper, more meaningful relationship in what was important to us, education. And so we set it up where for every hour of billable service we have as a firm, we put a book in the hands of a child. And that's something we can kind of use as a marketing tool within our organization. It's something we talk about, when we're talking to potential new clients. It's a differentiating factor between us and other accounting firms. And I think it's super important to be able to talk to your donors with respect to the fact that you can develop partnerships. And Kelly just posted a link to a book called Purpose Incorporated, that this talks all about what I'm talking about here in terms of the partnering with businesses. It was a book that Amy from Book Fairy shared with me, and it kind of resonated. And the more you can kind of partner with your corporate donors, and you can get them to, again, go from corporate donors to corporate partners, the better off you're going to be. And then I think part of it is, one of the other things here is I think sometimes nonprofits maybe undersell their value. And I think we need to find ways that we can better advocate for nonprofit value. And I think some of that is, and I think it's clear when you look at some of what the government is doing, right? The government is kind of stepping in at the Suffolk County level, where, good news is that the bill that was up in Suffolk County to try to limit compensation for nonprofit leadership and nonprofit staff, that was shot down, so that's good. But again, the fact that bills like this are being introduced means that government really doesn't understand the value of the nonprofit sector. Government doesn't understand that if the nonprofit sector steps in and does the work and government doesn't have to, it's a much cheaper operation, a much cheaper way of doing things than if government had to step in and do the services themselves. So I think what we need to do is we need to kind of educate our funders. We need to invite them to the space. Government needs to understand impact. I don't think government understands the impact. I don't think government understands how much we save taxpayers on an annual basis, because the nonprofit sector does work a hell of a lot more efficiently than government does. We need to invite funders behind the curtain and kind of let them see the magic and where the magic is happening and how the magic is happening and what's going on there. And as someone mentioned earlier, we need to discuss leverage. What are we doing in terms of showing how we leverage our operations so that, at the end of the day, we get more impact through collaboration. We get more impact through partnering. We get more impact through community projects and things like that. Actually, I was talking to a nonprofit yesterday, and one of the things that they're doing is they've teamed up with about 15 community-based organizations, and they're really looking for ways that they can help each other, how they can share resources, share ideas. Organizations that provide certain services, they're kind of trading off and bartering back and forth so that they can leverage and get more impact overall by doing things together as a group as opposed to doing things individually. And I think that's a kind of a great idea. I talked about this earlier, the great wealth transfer. Some of the key things to consider that by the year 2045, so we're looking at about 20 years from now, the expectation is that $84 trillion will be transferred from one generation to the next. The two big generations that are going to see the transference of the resources are the silent generation and the baby boomers. So those are individuals born prior to 1964, covers those two generations. And the baby boomers are the ones that are holding the largest level of resources. And we're going to see a lot of those resources kind of start to pass down to the next generations, the Gen X, the millennials, and the Gen Zs. So kind of if you think about this, right, just from that, we have a kind of a two-pronged approach to what we need to be thinking about here, right? So the first thing is we need to talk to our baby boomers and silent generation and make sure that they understand or that they're engaged with our organization so that when they do look to transfer that wealth, some of that transference happens to our organizations and they see the importance and the impact that they can have by transferring some of that wealth to the nonprofit sector. The second prong is we have to approach some of these younger generations, the wealth recipients, and make sure that they understand and get them involved now so that when that cash does come to them or those resources do go to them, that they know we're here and that they're engaged with us and they're interested in kind of now making more meaningful donations because they have the resources to do it. Part of that also is, if you are have some families that are very, very big within your organization, you want to make sure that, if you are working with the matriarch or patriarch of that family, and you haven't really engaged with the rest of the family, the younger generations and stuff, you want to make sure that you or open up those lines of communication so that if the matriarch or patriarch does pass away, that relationship still exists with the family and that money doesn't dry up. So some of the kind of important things to think about there. So some of the things that we can do is let's, adapt fundraising strategies, develop approaches, targeting tech-savvy, digital-focused younger donors. So how do we get those younger donors involved with our organization? Get them involved in maybe volunteering first. There are statistics that show that individuals who volunteer with an organization are much more likely to donate to that organization. So how do we get some of the younger generations who maybe right now don't have those resources, but will have them in the future? How do we get them more engaged within our organization, maybe from a volunteer perspective? How do we get them involved, so that when they do get the resources that they're more willing to kind of work with us? We need to, as we've been talking about all along, we need to develop stronger relationships with our donors. How do we kind of talk to those donors? How do we show the community impact that those donors are having? How do we make them understand the impact they're having? How do we show them lives that they're changing? And like I said, invite them behind the curtain and let them see what they're doing. We've talked about leveraging AI tools. Again, we want to make it personal. We want to make it targeted. We want to focus on what the donors are interested in. We want to, and as I mentioned before, and I know there were some individuals who kind of popped some information in the chat about the CRM systems, but we need to make sure that we've got strong CRM systems in place so that we have access to information so we can utilize that information to better be able to go out there and pull in the resources that we need. The next couple of slides I'm going to go through kind of quickly. These really just look at the various generations that are out there, and just keep in mind that not every generation thinks the same way. Every generation is a bit different. So when we're looking at how we want to engage the generations, we're going to engage them differently. So Gen Z, born between 97 and 2012. There's approximately 68 million of them in the United States. They tend to be more digital. They're socially conscious. They value authenticity and transparency. Again, these are individuals that maybe don't have the resources right now, but they are definitely much more socially minded. So we want to get them involved in volunteering within the organization. They offer a lot of real insight into social media and IT areas. So that's a good way to engage them. Get them involved in maybe a youth advisory board, or get them involved in some of the on your board itself, and maybe provide mentorship and leadership development and everything for them so that they can grow into more effective board members. Again, we want to engage them because they're estimated by the year 2045, they're estimated to inherit about $11 trillion. So we want to make sure that, we've got them on the hook. From a millennials perspective, there's approximately 72 million of them in the United States. Again, they're tech savvy. They value experience over goods, socially and environmentally conscious. So some of the similar traits to Gen Z. They are expected to inherit about $27 trillion. They already have some of their own assets at about 13.3 trillion. A lot of that is tied up in real estate and pensions and things like that. So when they do inherit the funds, they'll have more discretionary resources. Again, you want to get them more involved in volunteerism. They can do more skills-based volunteerism, so that's great. From a donation perspective, they do utilize crowdfunding platforms, social media campaigns. They are a group that you can go after for recurring donations. So again, and then if we look at the next three generations, you've got Generation X. Those are born between 1965 and 1980. Approximately 65 million of them. They're independent, they're pragmatic, they value work-life balance. So they use email marketing and direct mail is a good way to go after them for donations. They are interested in tax benefits and long-term impact of donations. They offer family-friendly volunteering opportunities. They promote causes that align with their personal and professional interests. They right now are sitting on about $46 trillion worth of assets, and they're expected to inherit about another 30 trillion. So they will be the generation that has the largest level of resources after the great wealth transference. Baby boomers, that's where the dollars are sitting today, 46 to 64, approximately 71 million of them in the United States. And they're currently holding on to about $78 trillion. They're not going to inherit a lot more when the silent generation passes. A lot of that money is going to, pass through Generation X and stuff, but they will inherit roughly another 4 trillion. So again, that's a population that you really want to get to. Those are the people that you want to be talking to, the baby boomers and the silent generation. That's where that wealth transference is going to be coming from over the next 20 years. And again, the silent generation, they're more of the ones that are that you're going to get to through direct mail campaigns and things like that. They're not as technology savvy. Them and the baby boomers are not as technology savvy. Volunteerism is for baby boomers is regular structured volunteerism. For the silent generation, most of them, the volunteer opportunities are a lot lower for them because they are older. You want to leverage for all three of these generations, Generation X, baby boomers, and silent generation, to the extent that you can leverage their experience and networks for your board. Your silent generations and baby boomers have a lot of contacts that they can hopefully open up some doors for you. And as I said, the baby boomers will be transferring or are holding about $78 million worth of assets, and the silent generation is about $18.6 trillion worth of assets. So you are looking at some big generations there. Let's talk a little bit about marketing trends. Some of the things that we're seeing, as we just talked about, some of the younger generations, they're much more in tune with email and texting and everything else. So we want to make sure that our email marketing is up to speed. We want to make sure that anything we're doing where we're accessing or directing people back to websites or donor pages or anything like that, that those donor pages open up just as well on a computer as just as well as a phone as they do on a computer. More and more people are accessing donor pages and everything through or websites through phones. So we want to make sure that the communication is appropriate and that all of that is done right. Some of the things you can do is some visuals and pop-ups. If you can kind of you see a lot of stores are doing it where, like, if you look at a product, that product follows you for a while. Some of those types of things are effective from a fundraising perspective too. A lot of it is just name recognition, and people get used to seeing your name and everything. You want to nurture relationships. I mean, that's the big part there. From a social media perspective, anytime you can do visual content as opposed to words, visual content is 650% more, gets more 650% more engagement. So again, if you guys are not using videos, if you guys are not using pictures and things like that, you really need to start looking at that type of stuff. Things like live streaming are important. Impact stories, behind the scenes, you want to build emotional connections. I mean, if you have the ability to do a video series where maybe if you're doing a helping an individual who maybe like, let's say a child with a cleft palate, where you get to meet the child up front, you get to meet the doctor, the child goes for the surgery, they come out of surgery, the cleft palate is repaired, all of that type of stuff where you're kind of telling the story and you've got the messaging that draws people in. And the more you can kind of draw people into the messaging and the storytelling and everything else, the better off you're going to be. And storytelling through video is so much more effective than storytelling through words. Some of the different social media outlets that are here, and I know TikTok right now is not around at this moment, but we're expecting that somebody will buy TikTok and it will come back on the scene. So just we left it in here instead of pulling it out. I know Microsoft is looking at it as a potential acquisition, so we do expect TikTok will potentially be back. But the average person spends about 2 hours and 23 minutes on social media every day. So you want to be where people are. So, and again, as we talked about the different generations, and we talked about where the different generations are spending their time. Facebook is typically where you find the baby boomers, the silent generation, Gen X are more so on Facebook. The younger generations are going to be more on the Instagram, the TikTok, and the Twitter. So this kind of helps you to kind of understand where you should be directing your attention. Right now, you can see that from a use perspective, 99% of all nonprofit organizations do use Facebook. 96% of nonprofits use Instagram. Only 39% use TikTok, and 88% use X or Twitter. 55% of people who interact with nonprofits on social media take action. And what does that action look like? Well, 59% of them donate money, 53% volunteer their time, 52% give some sort of item, clothing, food, whatever, so they make some sort of in-kind donations. 43% attend or participate in local charitable events. 40% buy products that support the charity. 25% contact political representatives, i.e. They do advocacy for the group, and 15% organize their own community events. So, if you can get your people to interact with you or interact with your organization through social media outlets, you've got a good chance of converting them into some sort of activity, which will ultimately convert to some sort of funding that comes into the organization. And 32% of online donors say social media is their top source of inspiration for giving. So again, the more you can make your posts inspirational, the more you can draw people in through those posts, the better off you're going to be. Moving along and keeping going on some of the marketing trends. I don't know if people are aware, but Google makes Google Ad Grants available. to nonprofit organizations. Nonprofits can get up to $120,000 annually to help boost their website traffic and awareness. Google will give you Google funds to use for free ad grants based on the size of the organization and how you're utilizing those funds. So again, something if you're not doing, you should definitely look into in terms of how you can potentially use Google ad grants. Kelly just put into the chat information on that, so you can kind of grab that and use that to look more into this. But it is really a good program that you should be looking at. And really, the Google Ad Grants help you to build SEO. They help you with respect to targeted ads to attract new donors and everything else. Again, as I said before, more and more people are getting into the internet via their cell devices. So you want to make sure you have mobile optimization. You want the mobile experience to be a seamless mobile experience. You want it to feel like it's the same as if you're on a computer. You want it to be, you want navigation to be user-friendly. If someone gets frustrated, they're going to leave your page and they're not going to make a donation. They're not going to come back. So you really want to make sure all of that's working well. Storytelling, I know a couple of you mentioned that in when we talked about earlier, what are you guys doing that differentiates you from everyone else? Storytelling is one of those big places that I think is super important. Videos, infographics, anything that you can make more relatable, anything you can do to create that a higher level of authenticity with your donors, that's going to be super, super important. And as I said earlier, donors are 650% more likely to interact with a video or than they are with written words. A couple other things to think about. Integrated campaigns, you want to try to kind of brand across all different channels. So what you're doing online, you're doing through your social media channels, you're doing through mail campaigns and everything else. And you could have multiple channels or multiple things running at the same time. If you're a larger organization, you have multiple programs, you can actually target each one of your campaigns to a different target audience. Data-driven strategy, take the time to understand the information. There's so many ways that you can kind of look at the data that's out there and use it to be more effective in what you do. So looking at things like email open rates, website clicks, you can start to really gain a deeper understanding of which of your campaigns are most effective. So if you're doing multiple campaigns, you can get an understanding, if one has more website clicks, if one has, more open rates, if one's drawing more donations, you know that those are the ones that you want to do because those will help you to kind of optimize your outreach. Consider looking at influencers or corporate partnerships. We talked about the corporate partnership stuff, but the other thing is there's a lot of influencers out there who have a lot of sway over the individuals that follow them. To the extent that you can develop relationships with these influencers, that can go a long way in helping to put your organization on the map. That can go a long way in helping for you to increase the level of donations and maybe acquire new donors that you can then develop stronger relationships with. So, and when we talk about influencers, also think about, people don't necessarily always think about gamers, but gamers have huge followings, and there are more people who watch gaming on the internet than watch the Super Bowl. So again, it is something that when you're kind of thinking about influencers and stuff, kind of think about the different platforms. I mean, like I said, gamers and the big platform they work off of is Twitch. Video marketing, short, impactful videos is what you want to work with. We talked about this a few times. You want to make sure that those videos are not long, keep them to a couple minutes at most, and then you want them to be as impactful as possible. and you want to try to connect with people emotionally. Again, you want to draw them in, similar to what we talked about earlier with the contestants that are on, the reality TV shows. Those, if you kind of see the backdrops and the little stories about their, or vignettes about their lives, they're typically short and they're typically impactful, and they typically kind of are there to draw you in and get you to like that candidate. Some of the HR trends that are out there. Obviously, we said before that salary is an issue. The salaries that nonprofit organizations are giving are not at the same level that other businesses are giving. 72.2% of respondents basically said that their salaries are the biggest challenge they're facing in terms of attracting and retaining staff. And some of that goes with, obviously, there's insufficient funds coming in, and that's only going to get more challenging, and that affects the competitiveness of salaries. Stress and burnout were noted by over half of respondents as contributing factors. To what extent are you doing things like mental health assistance for your staff? What can you do in terms of benefits that kind of are unique and kind of separate you? Approximately 1 in 5 respondents highlighted issues stemming from government grants and contracts as significant contributors to workforce shortages, which we've talked about. Nobody really wants to pay for administrative costs. And lack of accessibility of affordable childcare. So again, to the extent that you have the ability to maybe partner with another nonprofit organization for more affordable childcare, that could kind of help to impact recruitment and retention. From a hiring trend perspective, as I said before, some of the newer generations are much more interested in social responsiveness. They're much more socially minded. So you can definitely look to align your recruitment efforts with your organization's goals and culture. Talk about some of the social change and the social good you are doing as an organization, and help in your recruiting efforts in hopes of hopefully aligning with or resonating with your potential employees. DEIA, build diverse and inclusive teams. Got to be careful about that going forward. Remote work and flexibility, embrace hybrid and remote work where possible. I know with a lot of nonprofit organizations that is not always possible, especially with direct service providers, but to the extent that you can maybe change the workday. Maybe you do 4 10-hour workdays instead of 5 8-hour workdays to give people an extra day off. You got to look for ways that you can be more creative in the process. And then use AI for recruitment efficiency. Find ways that you can even use AI to maybe streamline some of the lower level functionality. Some of the compensation trends we're seeing, obviously, salaries are important aspect of things. Nonprofits, as we've talked about, don't necessarily have the ability to offer the same level of salaries that other businesses do. See what you can do in terms of offering higher benefits or different benefits that will, maybe compensate for some of that. Think about maybe performance-based incentives, trying to align compensation with organizational objectives so that, as individuals are kind of making a difference within the organization, they get paid more money. And be transparent in your practices, foster trust through clear communication about salaries. I think what we're seeing out there, and I know I've talked about this in the past, is the younger generation, they're very interested in aligning themselves with leaders that they trust and that they care about, and they will follow leaders. They're not always as committed to an organization. They tend to be more committed to certain leadership. So you want to try to align or make sure that your leaders are more empathetic of the needs of, and they provide better feedback. they're good communicators, they provide training. All of these things are going to be super, super important in terms of the keeping and retaining staff. The other thing I think that nonprofits don't necessarily do an effective job of is really communicating with their staff in terms of what the upward mobility within the organization is. And I think, one of the things that we do on every single review is we sit down with our staff and we talk about where are they within the firm, what's the next step up for them, and what do they need to do to get there. And I think at the nonprofit sector side, you got to kind of do the same thing. Where is the individual? What do they need to do to continue to advance and move within the organization? A lot of people leave one organization, jump to another because they don't feel there's advancement in the organization they're at. We have a few pages left. I'm going to kind of breeze through some of these. Succession planning is super important. We talked about leadership development. We need to invest in leadership. We need to build the future leaders of the organization. You need to update your plan and ensure both at the management level and staff level, as well as at the board level. I'm going to kind of skip a couple pages. You guys can read through some of this stuff. But there's some of the cyber trends. I'm really just going to quickly go through these. Increased adoption of cloud computing. Things are moving away from networks and moving more and more into the cloud. I think with cybersecurity concerns that are out there, sometimes it's safer to be up in the cloud and information gets updated on a regular basis. Same thing with from a cybersecurity concern, multi-factor authentication and extra security layers are super important. Make sure that if you're a lot of organizations have HIPAA or FERPA concerns, make sure that if you are transferring information, that all of that stuff is protected, it's data encrypted, and all of that stuff is in place, and that you're not leaving that information out there for people to grab. Data privacy is a big issue, data protection, integration of digital payment systems. People want to be able to pay through digital means and not just by writing a check. Nobody really writes checks anymore. And then, finding ways to increase the level of remote work through collaborative tools, things like we're doing here today with Zoom, but the other tools like Slack or Teams, and using that to build effective and efficient communication. We are seeing an uptick in attacks out there, and AI is only making it easier for the no-gooders to go out there and go after nonprofit organizations. The number of nonprofit organizations that come under attack on an annual basis is huge. So we have to go and make sure that we're doing a much, much better job of securing data and securing information. We talk about cyber insurance. Cyber insurance is great. Everybody should be looking into it and determining, whether they can get it. But cyber insurance is not your cybersecurity plan. You need to have cybersecurity in place. You need to be regularly testing your cybersecurity. You need to be educating your staff. Most of the time, people get in because your staff have let them in. So you need to be educating your staff about what emails they should and shouldn't be opening up. We do phishing testing here, where we allow for, or we send phishing emails to see if anybody bites. And if they do, we incorporate that into our education. So these are all things that you really should be looking at. And then make sure that we have digital inclusion. So access to technology, we want to make sure everybody has equal access to technology. There are ways that you can align your website so that it's visually appropriate. It's set up for those who have different levels of abilities. So you definitely want to make sure that your website and all of your digital information has that is digital inclusive. Last thing I want to kind of talk about, so our New Year's resolutions for 2025, be more strategic in your thought process. Take the time during 2025 to focus on strategic planning. I know we got away from strategic planning with the pandemic, but let's get back there and let's kind of focus on where we're going as an organization. Find ways to enhance collaboration. We've talked about that in the past, but at all levels with donors, funders, government, other nonprofit organizations. This will help you to enhance your ability to provide enhanced services, develop more meaningful relationships, community-based stuff, which we've talked about. Focus on ways to increase financial sustainability through enhanced discretionary funding, social enterprises, diversification of funding streams. We need to bring in more discretionary dollars. That's even more important today than it ever has been in the past. Increase the use of technology and innovation to streamline operations, provide advancement for existing employees, use it, like I said, in fundraising, in data collection and everything else, and then invest in leadership and talent management, right? We need to make sure that we have succession of board members and staff, and they need to be able to go through leadership training and management training so that we know when the new leadership takes over that they get it, they understand, and everything is good. So we're at 10 o'clock. Check out our full trend report. There's a lot more information in the trend report, a lot of good insight from some of the leaders in the nonprofit sector. This is me. I still look funny looking. Here's my contact information. If anybody has anything that they would like to go over, any questions they have, if they'd like to just talk, I'm here for you. That's part of, like I said, we believe heavily in the nonprofit sector. And we'd love to hear from you. Before everybody goes, if everybody can just drop in the chat if there are any topics they'd like us to talk about in the future. We always want to know what you guys want to hear about. So if there are things that you want to hear about, please post them in the chat so that we are in a situation where we can give you what you're looking for and we can make it more targeted. So thank you, everybody. I appreciate it. And thanks for being here.